everywhere. And how are you letting them compete with girls in school? That one drives me bananas. When you have biological males, all they have to do is they don't even have requirements in some schools. You don't have to be taking hormones. You could just identify and you can compete as a girl.
And of course, that causes injury to the young girls.
Of course.
And again, this gives me faith in the wisdom of the American people, because if you see how radically the Democrats leaned into this stuff 4 years ago, and how much Kamala Harris is running away from it today, most Americans, they don't really care who you sleep with. They're pretty open-minded about most lifestyle choices. But when you talk about having a biological male compete with their teenage girl in competitive sports, Americans are saying, no. This is crazy. You're causing injury to my kids. We have to stop this.
Not only that, it ruins chances of getting scholarships. If you were the number one player and then all of a sudden some guy comes along who wears lipstick, now he's the number one girl on the team. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
There was a recent pool tournament in England. It's a women's pool tournament, and in the semifinals, 2 guys are playing each other.
Yeah. Well, and it looks, when you see them in the actual swimming pool competing, it looks like the biological males are running at 1.5x speed and everybody else is running at normal speed, right? This is just clearly different. And to your point about it destroys opportunities for scholarships, I mean, go back to the original reason why we wanted girls' sports, why we have Title IX in the United States of America to begin with. We recognized that competitive sports, what does it teach, right? It teaches you how to participate on a team. It teaches you to recognize your own weaknesses and the strengths of your teammates and vice versa, right? I'm the father of a 2-year-old daughter. I want my daughter to learn these important life skills. I don't want her going into athletic competitions where I'm terrified she's going to get bludgeoned to death because we're allowing a 6'1" male to compete with her in sports where you should not have biological males competing with biological females.
Not only that, but they get to change with them in the locker rooms. That's where it gets there was one in Canada where a 50-year-old man identified as a teenage girl. He was a professor. Do you know about this guy?
I haven't heard about this.
And he was changing. He was in a swim meet with teenage girls.
Yeah.
And he's changing in the same locker room as them. And then
it's crazy.
The problem with that is there's a psychological condition called autogynephilia. And autogynephilia is where men are sexually aroused by the idea of dressing and behaving like a woman, but they're heterosexual. Now all of a sudden, these people with this known psychiatric disorder are allowed to just identify as a woman, and you're a bigot if you don't let them change in the women's room.
And you're expected to empower them at the expense of young women who are very often much more vulnerable for obvious reasons than young men. And it reminds me of, the very first congressional delegation trip that I ever took was to Paris. I think it was to Paris. And it's part of the Paris Air Show, and Ohio has all these, aviation interests. And anyway, long story short, I was talking to a very conservative woman at the Paris Air Show who was from Mississippi, and she was probably 65, 70. And it was really interesting because I was just like, how do you find the city? She had never been to Paris before, and I'm just, interested in people. So I was asking her, and she said, what's really interesting is I just feel like Paris, I would think of as very liberal, but I actually think Paris is more conservative than some of the big cities in the United States. And I said, oh, tell me more about this. And this woman doesn't know me very well, and she's clearly kind of embarrassed to tell me. But she walks through, she says, well, I just don't see any people. Like when you're in Paris, the girls are girls and the boys are boys. And that's true in Paris, and that's not necessarily true in some of our big cities. And then she says, she says, Senator Vance, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but when I was in New York City recently, I saw a grown man who was walking around in a miniskirt, and then she gets very quiet and she said, Senator Vance, I could see his balls.
He probably wanted you to see his balls.
And you realize, oh my God, this is not empowerment. This is not respecting lifestyle choices.
Right.
We're letting a grown man walk around in a miniskirt in broad daylight. Like, what are you talking about?
I feel like you should be allowed to wear a miniskirt. If a girl can wear a miniskirt, you could wear a miniskirt. That's not what bothers me.
But
what bothers me is if I have to see your balls.
To flash people in broad daylight in New York City?
You're a pervert.
You're a pervert.
You're just a pervert.
If that's what you're doing, you're a pervert. And I want all of us to say, whatever your political persuasion, just say, no, that's weird.
Right.
You're not allowed to walk down the street and flash children in the middle of